Teaching mindfulness to students in a sustainable and impactful way includes some basic brain science and some incrementally less structured meditation activities over time. Hi, my name is Erin Silcox from traumainformedteachers.com with practical tools for conscientious educators like you. Today I'm bringing you some thoughts on incorporating mindfulness into your classroom in a sustainable way. So, are you interested in reaping the self-regulation and focus benefits that mindfulness can have for your students? Do you want to help your trauma-affected students rewire their brains for academic success? If so, keep watching to learn an incremental approach to teaching mindfulness to your students. Getting your students to take mindfulness seriously starts with teaching them how it works. So you'll want to head on over either to my blog or some other YouTube videos that I have, which I can link below, or just Google, how does mindfulness work? And you can look at ways that mindfulness impacts our brain's structures and the parts of the brain that mindfulness actually changes and strengthens, and how those parts of the brain can then take over and be in control of other parts of the brain that might otherwise be taking over, like things that control heart rate and the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. So we want to make sure that students know the science behind why mindfulness works, and that is sort of a justification to them for why they should do it. One idea for teaching mindfulness to students is, and something that I've done in the past, is actually have them build a model of the brain. And like I was saying about the parts of the brain, have them look at how the brain develops sequentially. So how we have our brainstem that develops in utero, and that's responsible for heart rate, blood pressure, respiration. Then you have the limbic system and the amygdala that are responsible for emotional reactions and the way that emotions and memories interact in our brains. And then how we've got this thing called the cortex, which, and it's particularly the frontal cortex, which allows us to have a more conscious control of the other parts of our brain. And so they can build a model of the brain and something where it could either be with Legos or building blocks or clay. I actually had my students build a hat, and there was a printout that I found where it just showed all the different parts of the brain and their functions. And then they played a game where they pretended to be the brain, and they were asking each other questions about the brain. But by showing them the physical parts of the body, of the brain that are responsible for different parts of mindfulness, meditation activities, you can show them sort of how it works, get them excited to actually activate those parts of their brains, and then they can sort of interact with those models before and after a meditation to sort of maybe draw on it, where what controlled what during the meditation and when they felt like they were out of control. And they can just interact with those models. Another idea is to just get them wound up and have them do an activity when the room is chaotic and their heart rate is up, and then have them do a meditation and do the same activity afterward and do a little bit of a reflection, so that they can see that mindfulness has the power, meditation in particular has the power to help us become more able to focus and bring our brains to a better place for learning. So once you teach students what mindfulness is and why it works, it's imperative to make it a part of your daily routine. Just like with your own mindfulness practice, just like with brushing your teeth, just like with exercising. When you do something on a consistent basis, it's much more likely that it will become a habit. And with mindfulness, the only way you're really going to build that rewiring of the traumatized brain is through consistent and repeated practice. Because if it's inconsistent and if it's not repeated, it's really just, I hate to say a waste of time, because it can definitely help students in the moment, but it's not going to have that really, really powerful benefit of actually helping students to develop this sort of like long-term regulation abilities. So decide on a structured time of day. If you are an elementary teacher, you might have more control over that than if you're a secondary teacher. But I actually taught science to middle and high school students. It wasn't a residential treatment center, but I used the first 5 minutes of class to do this. And it just outweighs, like, making time for meditation, making time for a little mindfulness activity in your day. It's going to make a huge difference for students who've experienced trauma. So what does this actually look like? So you've got a time of the day, you've taught students what mindfulness is, but what does it actually look like, and how do you go from somebody who's never done it before to somebody who can sit there and meditate by themselves for 15 minutes? Well, start with really highly structured meditations, and not even just meditations, mindfulness activities. And so my favorite one to start with newcomers, with newbies who've never done it before, is a food meditation, or particularly a chocolate meditation. So, for instance, I'll take a Hershey's Kiss, I'll give it to the students, and before I even put it in their hand, I have everybody pay attention to every single aspect of the experience. If I have it in my hand and they see it, I want them to be paying attention to how it makes them feel. Are they excited? Are they do they feel their heart rate starting to beat a little faster? And then you give it to them, then you have them feel it, you have them smell it, you have them hear it, if it makes any sound, and then look at it, fully inspect it. One question I really like to ask students to attend to is, after you've unwrapped it, which is another really mindful moment, unwrapping it. What do you see when you unwrap it? After you've unwrapped it, have them pay attention to one thing that they see that they're going to try to notice inside their mouth with their tongue. Then they put it on their tongue, they feel what it feels like, they taste it, and you just ask them a million questions, not really, you ask them a bunch of questions about the chocolate, and then they just slowly start to taste it, move it around their mouth, finally they get to swallow it. I really like to juxtapose this with giving them a piece of chocolate right afterward, really, and saying, don't eat this mindfully, just eat this like you normally would, and see what they can notice about the difference between the two. So that's just really fun, highly structured. Another is visualization. So in a visualization, you just lead students through an imagined scenario, and if they're comfortable with it, you can have them close their eyes. If they're not, you can just have them look at a point in the near distance, and something that isn't going to be distracting. They can have their eyes open. But with the visualization, they actually, in their mind, go to a place that's not where they are right now, and they might walk on the surface of the moon, they might walk under the ocean, they might walk from through a forest, and just have them noticing sensory elements of that. I really liked using visualizations as a warm-up in science class, and for instance, if I'm teaching about climate or meteorology, I would have students imagine themselves in the eye of a hurricane, imagine yourself in the wind of a hurricane, in the really high sustained winds. So that's another really good one. A body scan meditation is also really well structured, and it's just something where you tell students, and with visualization, with the chocolate meditation, with the body scan, you can find things online that are either YouTube videos or little scripts that you can print out, so you don't have to make these things up on your own. But for a body scan meditation, you just have them pay attention to your shoulders, relax your shoulders, pay attention to your forearms, relax your forearms, pay attention to your hands, things like that, where you can guide them through the different parts of their body. And then moving into sort of less structured activities. So then you've got a guided walking meditation where you prompt students ahead of time to pay attention to things, or you can set them up with some device and headphones, and they can listen to a walking meditation where they pay attention to, they're going to be walking really slowly, and notice every time they put their foot down, a connection with the earth. And then less guided would be a guided breathing meditation But the idea is, as you're moving from these really structured to these less structured activities, students have been doing mindfulness activities for several weeks, several days, and they understand what it means to have a distracting thought, just note it and let it go. And so they're able to go longer without any support, without anybody telling them what to pay attention to, or a physical thing that they're paying attention to. And so a guided breathing meditation would be a little bit less structured than a guided body scan meditation. And then the final thing would be just unguided meditations. And those would be where students are, they could be sitting in their desk and you could do a nonverbal signal and they could know, okay, I'm going to take... they can do, we call it 4 square breathing. So they breathe in for 4 seconds, out for 4 seconds. And they can look at like the whiteboard and go up one of the sides over 4 seconds. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. And it's just an activity where they're guiding themselves, and in the actual strength that they've developed in their attention will allow them to go from maybe an agitated state to calming themselves down by using some mindfulness, breathing on their own, or some sort of mindfulness activity on their own. So there are so many ways to incorporate mindfulness into your classroom. Remember, you want it to be structured, you want it to be repetitive. You can teach students about the brain to justify how it works, why they should be doing it, especially for trauma-affected youth, letting them really know maybe how trauma has impacted their brain. You might be careful doing that. You might need to talk to some mental health professionals in the building before you do that. But really teaching students how mindfulness works, it's going to justify it for them. And then start with really structured things. Start with things where you're really involved and you can help them learn that thoughts are going to come and thoughts are going to go. But it's what you do with noticing that thought. Do you go with it, or do you stay with whatever you're paying attention to? And they'll be able to bring their attention back to the present moment and start to build the wiring in their brain to strengthen their attention over time.